Welcome to the PDA Parenting Podcast. This show will be dedicated to supporting parents raising kids with PDA autism. I'm your host, Amy Kotha, a parent coach and a mom to a PDAer myself. This podcast is here to provide you with practical insights, real-life experiences, and expert guidance to help you better understand your child and to parent from a place of connection, empathy, and understanding. Whether you're new to PDA or you're already familiar with the journey, you're in the right place. Hi, friends, and welcome back to the podcast. So you might have noticed that the last few weeks have been a bit quiet here, and that's because life for me outside of this space was not. So my family recently went through a crisis, and it's the kind of crisis that really just stops you in your tracks. And I'm not going to share all the details because that's my child's story, but I do want to share what it felt like from my side as her mom trying to hold on. So before we go any further, I do want to reassure all of you that everyone is okay. But still, it was a terrifying experience, and it was humbling, it was shattering, and maybe more than anything, it was disorienting. Like this completely caught me off guard because honestly, I thought that we were past these levels of intensity, these levels of crisis in our home. Like it was a season and now we're in a different one, which to be fair, we are, but well, we'll get back to that. So we've, of course, had our ups and downs over the years. And, I'm trained in youth and adult mental health first aid. I literally have certificates hanging on my wall. I just got recertified last spring. And then I coach other parents through crisis, and I have rehearsed and awkwardly even role played these what if scenarios in small groups more times than I can count. But when it happened to my own home, every bit of that training flew right out of my head. So maybe you know that feeling like sometimes when something happens and your blood suddenly feels like it runs cold, like it's ice water, your mind blanks out, and you hear your voice speaking to the 911 operator, and it sounds totally foreign, like all high and squeaky. And the entire time that you're waiting for help to arrive, you just can't stop thinking, this can't be real. Like everything feels completely off. It's so out of sync with what you know to be true. And that's where I found myself recently. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that day and more about what carried me through to where I am now. And where I am now, what has gotten me here are really two things, which are hope and community. So that day started out like so many hard days have in our house and probably in yours. Stress had been piling up for my daughter for months. Like looking back now, I think really it probably started about 3 years ago, if I'm being honest. And I can see now that she was kind of slowly moving into burnout over that time. So, as part of her neurodivergent, she has a very sensitive nervous system. And when that system gets overloaded, it's like every dial gets cranked up. So, all the sensory inputs, think sounds, sensations, and then, of course, emotions and even thoughts. So, she'd been showing it. She'd been showing that she was dealing with fatigue and brain fog, headaches, and other physical symptoms, anxiety for sure. But she had been pushing back against it, like it was pissing her off and she wasn't going to cave in to its demands. Well, that afternoon of that Monday, she just hit a wall. And all afternoon, she needed my co-regulation just continually, but nothing seemed to be helping. And usually in the past, when she hits that level of overwhelm, she slows down. So it's like she's moved past the fight or flight response without healing, without balancing. And then it like hits a critical point, and then it goes down, kind of like plummets down into shutdown. And that's something that is actually very human. If you're going through something and you're under a lot of stress and you're feeling dysregulated, if you're in fight or flight and you don't work through that, you can't get through that stress cycle and heal, that next step is kind of plummeting down into shutdown. So she moved through the storm and into kind of a foggy stillness, I would say. Like she's told me that it feels like jello when she's in that place. There's a stuckness to it, and it's frightening, and everything feels slow. So typically, when that begins to happen, she knows how to care for herself. Like I said, this is not the first time that it's happened, and we're in a different season. She's older, she's matured, and learned a lot. So she really knows how to care for herself. So she will typically go to her room, it's her safest space, and she relaxes. And when she's doing that, I just give her time. And she knows I'm nearby, but I don't need to be next to her sometimes, but that's very rare. So that space that she's in just usually helps her to reset. But this time was different. And I didn't notice it consciously at the time. But after the fact, when I'm looking back, because of course we know hindsight is 2020. But looking back, I noted that even in moving towards her safe space, something was different in that moment. She was moving quicker and the energy was different. And again, looking back, I can see that situation as not our normal pattern. Something wasn't right. So in the moment, my nervous system was just trying to recover from, the interaction that had just completed. So I wasn't processing all of this. Now, what I had started to realize during that Monday, during that dysregulated day, was also that she had just started a new medication a couple days prior. It was a stimulant medication. So her doctor had prescribed it because, like I said, she was having executive functioning struggles. She was having concentration issues and fatigue. And she does have ADHD. So it made sense to consider maybe trying a different treatment. And I get that, makes total sense, no one's fault. However, in this case, in her already exhausted system, it seemed like that medication just threw fuel on a nervous system fire. And her body suddenly had energy, but her mood hadn't caught up. So there was a mismatch there. And this mismatch created a kind of dangerous spark. And what I've since learned about that is that clinicians actually have a term for this. They call it activation risk. And it's actually one of the reasons why some medications that you see, especially stimulants or antidepressants, they come with black box warnings. And that's can be because energy can return before the emotional regulation does. Now, I didn't know that term a month ago. What I did know was that my body felt it before my brain interpreted it. And my instincts were telling me to stay close. So I didn't wait. And instead of giving her like the usual space, because typically I'll pause and I'll calm my own nervous system down. So normally I take a walk or maybe I watch some trash TV for a while. But this time I followed her after just maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I was sitting on the couch and all of a sudden I don't know, felt like this adrenaline surge through me, like I need to go check on her. And it wasn't to confront her. I just felt like I needed to be nearby. And my friends, I am so grateful that I did. And if you've ever had a moment when your gut screamed, don't walk away, oh, I hope you listened, and I hope you will always listen to that because our bodies know before our brains do. This was a perfect example of my amygdala, that smoke detector part of my brain, sensing danger before my thinking brain, my prefrontal cortex, could connect, come online, and interpret what was happening. So the next hour or so was a complete blur. Like help arrived, they were amazing. We had a somewhat extraordinarily terrifying ambulance ride through rush hour traffic, but we ended up at the closest hospital. And the next 16 hours I spent with her in the emergency room in this dark, windowless room on basically a folding chair. and just researching on my phone like crazy. Thank God I thought as I was running out the door to grab my phone charger. But, I was terrified. And at the same time, I had to push for information. No one was even coming in this room to talk to us. They would just come in and, pull labs and do a quick check of her. But no one was talking to me. So I was having to push for information. I never got it. I had to advocate with the information that I was looking up on my phone. And then I had to finally answer some questions to some people who came in. I had to make decisions that I wasn't adequately prepared for. And then after that came the hospital stay with fluorescent lights and constant noise and trying to make decisions on no sleep, running on coffee and adrenaline, and missing my other child, worrying about my clients, and wondering how any parent is supposed to do all of this at once. If you've been through any type of big crisis or like big T trauma, you know how strange it is when the world keeps spinning, but yours has stopped. Emails are still arriving, and work was actually going on at our house. We were renovating our basement, and the contractors were there. But in those few days, all I could do was sit by her and keep showing up. And even then, even in that exhaustion, I realized something. What I realized was that this is what hope looks like. And it's funny because to me, like years ago, I used to think of hope as, I don't know, what came to my mind when I said the word hope would be sparkly pink confetti, which is probably some stupid Barbie girly thing, but I would think of sparkly pink confetti. But this kind of hope was not that kind. And it wasn't toxic positivity. It was the kind of hope that takes shape in hospital chairs and sleepless nights. It's the kind that says, I'll stay even when it feels impossible. And that's where the next part of this story begins. It was the lessons really that I carried out of those hospital walls. So when the main crisis had finally passed, I felt like a cyclone had blown through me, and I kept replaying every second, trying to understand what had just happened. What did I miss? What had I done wrong? What did I do right? But I assure you that most of my thoughts were about what did I do wrong? Now, no one tells you how to parent in the days after a close call, how to breathe again, how to let your guard down enough to sleep, how to trust your own judgment when, like, this entire world that you thought you knew has tilted on its side. So, for days and days, like, my body stayed on high alert. And it was that kind of alert where you're listening for every sound in the house, every door closing, every silence that seemed to last a beat too long. And it was my nervous system was convinced that the danger wasn't over. And it wasn't just danger in my daughter, it was any danger anywhere, like anything, anyone in the house. And in some ways, it's because it wasn't over, because that's what trauma does. Trauma keeps you replaying this moment. There's no timestamp. It keeps replaying the moment and you get those feelings. And it's like it's doing that on purpose as a survival mechanism so you won't be unprepared again. Now, I've coached other parents about this. We've talked about how hypervigilance after crisis is the brain's way of protecting us. But living it was really just another story because I was exhausted and scared. And then at the same time, it felt really odd because at the same time that was happening, I was also extremely grateful. So it was like holding two totally different things in my head at one time. I was so unbelievably grateful that she was nearby when she was taking that stimulant medication. I was grateful that she was safe. I was grateful that I listened to my gut. And then at the same time, I was just completely wrung out. When everything fell apart, I discovered that hope was actually something that could help support me. And again, not sparkly hope, not loud hope, and really not even abstract, like that abstract concept that we feel, I think, about hope. Hope really is quiet. It's like a solid floor under your feet while the room is spinning around. And it's hard to explain, but I've always felt like I've been wired for hope. I always tell myself and I tell my family, my kids are sick of hearing it, but I always say there's a solution to every problem. And that has been my guiding principle throughout my adult life. And without having hope, that just wouldn't hold up. So hope has been a verb for me, but I hadn't realized that it's also a noun. I didn't realize how much I'd been storing up. And it's like a savings account that I didn't even know that I was building. So, all the therapy appointments that were kept, all the late night talks, all the times that I refused to give up on connection, each one was a tiny deposit. So, when the bottom dropped out, there was something to draw from. I remembered something that Dr. Matt Zakreski, who is a clinical psychologist and a professional speaker, he said in a webinar that I heard once about hope, and he speaks about hope a lot. I would suggest you look him up. But he had said in a webinar about hope, this one concept that really stuck with me. And interestingly, over the last few weeks, like I haven't thought about that, I don't know, in a couple of years, but over the last few weeks, his name and what he said about hope just kept repeatedly popping up in my head. Because he had said hope is a kind of psychological capital, and it grows when we invest in relationships, in preparation, in these tiny actions that tell the brain you're still moving forward. Hope, according to Dr. Matt, lives in the balance between faith and action, between what we can't control and what we can. And that balance made so much sense to me because since this event, several people have been asking me, how do you move forward now? How do you move forward? And that's a big question. I can't fix everything that my two daughters face. But I can keep showing up. I can prepare for the next storm, not from a place of fear, because that just doesn't work, but a place of love. And then there's hope as a verb again, because that would be hope in motion. That's the practice of hope. And the other thing that I want to talk about that saved me was community, because this time I actually let people in. When I was a younger parent, I didn't. I thought that, I bought into society's conditioning that as parents, we know it all, we do it all. If we can't do it, it says something about our parenting and it's shameful. So back then, I didn't even have the language for what was happening. And well, both of my kids struggled for a while, and I didn't know about nervous system sensitivity. I didn't know about nervous systems. I didn't know anything about neurodivergent burnout or how different regulation can look in neurodivergent kids. So I kept it to myself. And like many of you, I was so afraid of judgment. And really, rightfully so, because I cannot tell you how many times my parenting was scrutinized when my child didn't respond typically to a medication or a therapy. I've sat in doctor's office where the doctor would say, okay, well, that didn't work. So I guess now we're going to have to look at what's going on at home. And I get it in some ways, but also in other ways, it's not okay. But I was so afraid that people would only see the behavior, kind of the top of the behavior iceberg that Mona Delahooke talks about in her books. The top of the iceberg is all I was afraid people were seeing and not what was at the base of the iceberg. What is underneath the surface that's causing the behaviors? Because that's the important part and that's where we need to look. But this time, I knew better. So in the middle of the night, and I was still in that shaky crisis fog. This was the night, the 16 hours in the ER. I reached out to this small group of local moms who are also raising neurodivergent kids. And my reasoning was that I had to give direction to the health team. My daughter had to be moved to another hospital and for a different specialty. And I wasn't confident in it. It's not anything that I really knew about. So I sent one text late at night, just a few words, and within minutes, messages started flooding back to me. We're here. You're not alone. What can I do? Can I bring you something? Can I sit with you? And oh my gosh, you guys, this is when I just finally let go. I allowed myself to feel cared for and to pause in being that strong caregiver for just a few minutes. And the tears came. And I had held it together until then. I was sitting on this freaking hard folding chair, or I don't think it folded, but it was a terrible chair in the dark, phone glowing in my hand, reading this scary information that the nurses were refusing to discuss with me, and wiping my face, wiping my tears away with this stale turkey sandwich because there were no tissues nearby. Now, it wasn't pretty, absolutely not, but it was real and it was healing. And those women, they didn't fix anything. They had no suggestions regarding my question. They had no idea, but they held me in their words, and that was enough. And community showed up in other ways too. Friends sent food and gift cards. People texted more than once after I didn't reply, which was fine. They didn't expect responses. They just wanted to let me know that they were there. These small kindnesses that were shared to me that really spoke to me and said, "You matter. Your child matters." And even the professionals became part of that web. When we met with my daughter's primary care doctor afterward, we went in to talk about lab work, and he didn't just look at her labs, he looked at her and he said, "Let's raise your quality of life. Let's look at how all these little pain points that you're dealing with, how all of these add up, all of these seemingly smaller physical issues that aren't small when you put them together, which no one has. And let's address them. Let's look at you holistically. Let's get you back on your path following your dreams." So here we had walked into this clinic expecting a lab order, and we walked out with hope. And that's what community looks like. Community is people and professionals, peers, anyone willing to see the whole picture and to keep holding light when you can't. But, even with that hope, the days that followed were really some of the hardest of my life because, as all of you know, crisis doesn't end when the danger passes. It just seems to change shape. So, after the hospital discharge, there were, of course, medications to adjust, no more stimulants, forms to sign, doctors to call, follow-ups to schedule, all the things. And there was still the rest of my life waiting, right? There was another child who needed me, a business that had paused mid-stride. There were contractors still working on my house. The world didn't stop just because I had. So I moved through each day kind of in that half here, half not, kind of tired that just seems to be deep, deep within your bones. And at night, I'd crawl into bed and I would replay every moment. What I could have done differently. What did I miss? What did I somehow manage to do right? How did I do that? My mind was like a movie that I couldn't turn off. And underneath all of it was this quiet question that every parent asks after something like this, which I hear from other very um, worried parents who also have kids who struggle. How do we move forward now? And that's where the lessons started to take shape for me and led to this podcast, actually. And it's nothing fancy or super profound. This is just coming out of the wreckage. It's small truths that feel real enough to hold on to. So here are the three biggest lessons that I learned from this crisis. So, lesson number one, burnout is real. For our kids, absolutely. But also for us, the constant vigilance, the decision fatigue, the walking on eggshells, it all takes a toll on you and it can sneak up on you. And sometimes you don't even realize how close you are to running on empty until emergency lights are flashing and you have nothing left to give. Crisis just kind of tends to force you to see what's been wearing you down all along. And then lesson two, humility matters. Now, I've been trained in crisis response for years. I've coached parents through their own emergencies, and still, when it was my child, I froze. And that doesn't mean I failed. It means I'm human. It reminded me that love and knowledge, they don't cancel fear. We can know every protocol in the book, and in the moment, our nervous systems still take over. It's a survival mechanism, and our bodies are really good at keeping us alive. Lesson number 3. Hope and community are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Hope isn't a feeling, an abstract feeling that you just conjure up. It's something that you build quietly, day by day, through connection and through care. And I think that's why Dr. Matt's words have always stayed with me from his talks and his webinars on hope. I think actually his webinar on hope was the first PDA North America webinar that I ever saw. So it's been a while since I watched that, but it really touched something in my heart. And on top of hope, there's community. And community is not a crowd, it's a handful of people who will text again when you don't reply, who will drop food at your door, who hold the light steady when yours is flickering. These are the things that carry us. And here's the truth, right? When crisis hits, your thinking brain is not going to be available. It's not weakness, it's biology. So your survival system steps in and your reasoning, your problem-solving brain takes a backseat. And that's why making a plan before you need it is one of the kindest gifts that you can give to yourself. So I've actually created a document that I'm sharing with you in the show notes here that will help you to create your own plan today. And here are the 5 steps that I've included. So number 1 is keep emergency numbers easy to find. In the US, of course, we know 911, and then there is also 988, which is a suicide and crisis line. If you're outside of the United States, look up your local hotline and save it right now before you forget. And also save the number of one trusted friend or family member that you can call first. Someone who maybe will meet you or be able to speak for you or simply keep you grounded. Number 2, know your hospitals ahead of time. Which emergency room is closest to you and actually prepared for neurodivergent or mental health crisis? Or maybe which ones are university hospital ERs that might have more of a likelihood of being neuroaffirming? Write those down because when you're panicked, you won't want to be scrolling for directions or recommendations. Number 3, have the essentials in one place. Your child's name, date of birth, diagnoses, medications, allergies, insurance information, emergency contacts. Keep it in your phone and keep a printed copy in your bag. When you're too flooded to think, that list is going to do the thinking for you. Number 4, create a 4-step crisis plan. Make it simple and clear enough to follow even when you can't focus. So for me, it's call for help, tell responders my child is neurodivergent and in crisis. Go to the hospital you've identified and call your trusted person. That's it, 4 lines. Let the paper carry the plan when your mind can't. And then number 5, tell your community what actually helps. Share information. People want to show up, they just need direction. So is it meals? Is it check-ins? Is it just text and say, I'm here, you don't have to respond? That night in the ER, my sister stayed up playing gin on her phone with me until I said she could finally go to sleep. She was actually in a different time zone and it was later there, and it must have been 3 o'clock in the morning by then. But that quiet presence held me up more than any advice could have. So, this isn't about living in fear. It's about loving your future self enough to prepare. It's about knowing that when the next storm comes, and, let's be real, it might not, but you'll have something solid beneath you. And after all of that, after the hospital days, the follow-ups, the sleepless nights, life has begun to move again for me. It's been slow and awkward, and, there was no neat ending that was tied off with a little bow. There has been no single moment to this day when I have thought, phew, okay, it's over now. Thank God that was hard. And I have said that at the end of some of our other seasons, but this was different. And now I feel like I've been going through more like putting small pieces of normal life back together, like folding laundry, doing emails, working, watching shows with my girls, all the things. But now they seem to be all the things with a little slant to them. Both of my daughters are technically adults now, and as much as every cell in my body wants to keep them safe, I can't. And I think maybe that's the hardest part of this entire experience is parenting through crisis and then accepting where our control ends and where their responsibility begins. I can't make every decision for them. I can't protect them from every risk, but I can stay steady. I can keep showing up as a somewhat calm but regulated presence, because that is truly the strongest safety net that any parent can offer. And so that's what I've been continuing to practice. I've been taking care of my own nervous system so that I can show up for theirs, and then trying to notice when my mind starts replaying all the what ifs and gently bringing it back to now. It's also been important to try to let myself really have a deep knowing that good enough is enough. And then continuing to invest in our relationship because seriously, connection is where hope lives. And that's really all I can do. Years ago, when we were having crisis experiences in our home much more often, I didn't have this language. I didn't know about burnout or sensory overload or nervous system sensitivity. And all I knew was that things were really hard and I was exhausted. That lack of understanding left me isolated and ashamed. Now I can see the bigger picture, and I hope so much that you can as well. Because understanding it doesn't fix everything. I wish I could tell you that there's a silver bullet, but obviously there is not. But understanding does lead to compassion, and compassion is extremely, extremely powerful. That's also why you'll hear me here on this podcast and on my social media and in person. You'll hear me just continuing to talk about community because the stigma around crisis is real. Frankly, I experienced it in the ER that night. It was very disappointing. Too often, when our kids struggle, people look at the parents first as if we somehow caused it, or they immediately look at our kids through a behavioralist, ableist lens. And it doesn't matter how old your kid is. And that kind of judgment silences families who need help the most. But silence never heals anything, connection does. What I so very much want for us, the parents who are listening right now, is a community where we can say out loud, yes, crisis happens. And no, it doesn't mean that we're bad parents. It doesn't mean that our child is a problem. It means that our families need more understanding, more support, and more spaces that tell the truth about how hard this can be. We weren't meant to do this alone. Human beings are social creatures. We regulate in relationship. It starts the day that we're born and it never ends. When we share our stories, we can heal together. So for me, moving forward is looking like this. It's talking about things and helping others understand. It's planning ahead for the what ifs, not out of fear or rumination, but preparedness. Tending to my own nervous system like it's sacred because all of our nervous systems are sacred. And it's practicing radical acceptance of my limits, truly, and of what's mine to hold and what's not. And that is so hard. I think radical acceptance is something that I'll be working on until I'm no longer here. And then holding on to hope, the real kind, not the sparkly pink Barbie kind, but the real kind of hope, the quiet kind that lives in small moments together, shared laughter, deep breaths, the pages of my journal. It's not a quick fix, it's a long game, and that's okay. We know that. Because every day that we keep moving, we're building that savings account of hope again, tiny deposits of courage and connection and grace. And if there's one thing that I want you to take from this today, the reason that I've shared this very intimate, vulnerable time of our lives with you, is I want you to understand in your heart that we can't do this alone and you're not meant to. Parenting a sensitive, neurodivergent child can be intense. Sometimes it feels relentless. And yes, crisis can happen, but we don't have to carry it in silence or shame. We can lean into our community, we can prepare for the what ifs, and we can build a reservoir of hope that will hold us when everything else feels like it's falling apart. That's what carried me through. It was knowledge, community, hope, and that's what I want for you too. Remember, if you ever find yourself in crisis or fearing for your child's safety, please don't hesitate. Reach out for help right away. In the US, you can call or text 911, 988. You can reach out to your local health department and police department and see maybe there is another local line. If you're outside of the US, there are international hotlines that can be found at findahelpline.com. You are not alone, and help is available 24/7 in some places. I know not everywhere, I wish it was, but I would say not everywhere yet. But let's keep working toward building that. And if you want ongoing support and learning, connection, stay here with me. This podcast is our space for all of those things. And before we close today, I want to share something that might help you to keep building that reservoir of hope that we've been talking about. In January, I'm going to be leading a 12-week course called Raising a Child with Big Baffling Behaviors. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's a parent course that was originally developed by Robin Goebel. I've been working in her immersion program for the past year, and I've adapted and expanded it for families like ours, parents who are raising sensitive, maybe PDA, neurodivergent kids who need a new kind of understanding. We'll learn together, we'll practice together, and remind each other that none of us are alone in this work. The waitlist is open now. You can find the link in the show notes. I hope you consider joining us because I would love to walk this next season with you. So until next time, keep being the best, amazing parent that you are for your child, and I'll meet you back here soon.